Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and today on THEOSOPHIA, Esoteric Wisdom, I bring you to Lynne Salomon MIceli of the EDGAR ARE of New York City. Greetings, Lynne. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you, Hercules. Good to be here.
I'm looking forward to your show, and just holler if you need me.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Okay, tonight we're going to be talking about Edgar Cayce's A Search for God groups. My guests are Judith Stevens and Savanna Barbarian. Welcome, Judith and Savanna.
Welcome. We're glad to be here.
Thank you for having us.
And I'm happy to have you. I've been thinking about the two of you and thinking that Judith is kind of like a living institutional memory of ARE. And Savanna is one of our new, young, enthusiastic carriers of the light. So it's really nice having you here together as a team. So both Judith and Savanna work for ARE, which is the Association for Research and Enlightenment, the organization that preserves, shares, and researches the information given by the Edgar Cayce readings. Edgar Cayce, for those who don't know, I'm always surprised that there are those who don't know, was an American psychic and mystic who lived from 1877 to 1945. He gave over 14,000 psychic readings on topics ranging from health and healing to reincarnation, ancient cultures, technical inventions, future prophecies. And to let you know a little bit about my guests today, Judith Stevens has been a student of the Edgar Cayce readings for over 50 years and has served on the staff of the ARE for over 30 years. She's currently the National Outreach Facilitator for ARE, and she's also a writer, poet, a musician, and a yoga instructor. And as I said, I think she's at this point kind of the living incarnation of the institutional memory of the organization. And Savanna Barbarian, Vanna to her friends, is the study groups coordinator. That would be what we're talking about today, the Search for God study groups, and the prayer group coordinator at ARE headquarters in Virginia Beach. She was drawn to the readings of Edgar Cayce when she was 14, and her passion is connecting others to what she has found beneficial, and especially helping to start study groups all around the world. She's been on staff at ARE now for 3 years. She is also an artist, a poet, and a young spokesperson for her generation. So, Judith and Savanna, let's start with the history of the Search for God groups. And I know there's quite a story about how they first started. So could you talk to us and share that with us?
Shall I? Good. Okay. Well, Mr. Cayce was at his lowest ebb when the hospital closed and he lost his beloved hospital, gave it back, lock, stock, and barrel. And Gladys,
Maybe we should just stop and explain the hospital.
Okay. It was his lifelong dream to have a hospital that utilized the readings, suggestions for people, to have doctors, naturopaths, osteopaths, chiropractors, people of every persuasion to do the kinds of things that were suggested in the health readings. So that happened because a couple of brothers who had New York Stock Exchange seats put up the money for the hospital. Largely, they fronted the money. It was built, and then the hospital ran for 2 years here in Virginia Beach. It had 30 beds, and of those 30 beds, part of it was tithed. In other words, a person who couldn't afford to come in was allowed to come in. That was part of Mr. Cayce's rules, that if they were going to have the hospital, anybody was going to be able to come. And so when he lost that, Lynne, he was at his lowest. Gladys said he was so low that it was scary for the people around him. They took a reading, and the reading actually said, if Edgar Cayce is not put to use where you are, then we have work for him on the other side. And you can bet that that sent everybody scrambling. So right away, they decided that they were going to ask him for readings so that they could learn how to be more sensitive, intuitive, psychic, if you will. And of course, the reading said that the word psychic meant of the soul. It wasn't some woo-woo thing out there. It was very straightforward and plain and simple. Do you want to add to that? Anything?
I think you said it best.
All right. It started with 17 people meeting in an apartment in Norfolk, and it winnowed down to 12. And that's how the first study group started. They asked Mr. Casey a series of questions, and from those questions came a wonderful series of books, lessons. So we have a book 1, a book 2, and even a book 3 that was not completed, but we have 4 chapters that are used. So
Now when that group started, they didn't expect what happened, did they? They didn't expect to write a book. They didn't expect even necessarily to work together as a group, right? They just, yeah, they just.
I don't think they knew what they were in for, really.
No. Okay, go on. So,
and it was interesting because in that group, there were housewives, an insurance salesman, there was a tugboat driver, you know, he came after his wife got involved. There were all kinds of people, and they melded together and really became a community. And when Mr. Casey gave a series of life readings, it was discovered that many of those people had worked together before, Lynne, in other incarnations.
that's not, well, if you know the Casey readings, that's not surprising because they all kept coming together. Yes.
It's like we come in soul groups. I think Savanna and I are here to work together because we just love this work so much, and it just was a meeting of the minds.
So they started working together. They would be given a reading by Casey, and he told them they were going to do something that was going to affect people for generations to come, correct?
He did.
So they would be given a reading, and they were told to go and apply what the reading taught them, right?
They were told that they would not get another reading until they put into practice the first reading. So the first chapter in the book was cooperation. And at first they thought that was strange. They said, we know how to cooperate. But the book was talking about cooperating with God, not just getting along with your buddies. So that was a new experience for many of them. And they had a couple of people in the group who were school teachers. One was Esther Wynn. She quickly became part of the compilation committee, which was Gladys, Hugh Lynne, and Esther. So the 3 of them compiled the readings and then broke them down into more assimilable parts so people could understand them a little more readily.
Let's tell people who Gladys and Hugh Lynne were, because we're not necessarily only talking to ARE people.
We'll tell you.
So,
Yeah, well, I actually work, and I'm lucky enough to work in Gladys's original office where the readings were kept, the original vault was. So she was Mr. Casey's stenographer. And Judith can tell you how special she was. She had firsthand experience with her, was in her study group, and getting to hear the stories about her and her spirit, you know, that Mr. Casey found her, you know, and their connection from past lives. It's so magical to me, and the feeling of being over in the original hospital building and working where she was every day. It's so magical.
And Hugh Lynne, of course, was the elder son of Edgar Casey, and he was a skeptic about reincarnation in the beginning. In fact, he was highly indignant that his parents had gotten a reading about reincarnation for him when he wasn't consulted. He quickly came around because the readings themselves told him that he should go to, instead of Columbia University, where he was thinking he was going to college, the readings told him to go to Washington and Lee. And it said, you will meet people that you have had lifetimes with before, and you will be able to test your theories. So you see.
and so that's where he met Thomas Shugru,
Yes,
who was the first biographer of Edgar Casey.
right.
Okay, but now we've gone off on a little bit of a tangent.
That's how
Okay,
his work goes.
It's easy to do.
So what you called the compendium committee?
The compilation committee.
compilation committee
Yes.
was Lynne, CAYCE'S son, Gladys Davis, his stenographer and secretary, and Esther Wynn.
Right.
And they did what?
They actually studied the reading that was given, and then they broke it down into parts, wrote it like a book, the book I showed you. Each of the chapters they wrote. Then they went back to Mr. CAYCE. He lay down, gave another reading, and went over their notes and said, yes, that's right, or no, this needs more explanation. You know, he really edited everything. So both of these books have been edited, book 1 and 2, but book 3 was not completed. He died before it could be completed. He was giving so many readings that he couldn't get back to this. But we kept the 4 chapters, and Lynne once came into my office and said, Judith, I want you to publish the 4 chapters. And I said, well, they're not done. You know, we don't have the completion. He said, groups will use it anyway. He was right. I'm in 2 groups right now, online, and one about to happen at headquarters, where we're in book 3. We're studying those 4 chapters.
And so, but other people besides those 3 also contributed to the writing, correct? Because sometimes in some chapters of the book, there are personal experiences that group members shared with the material.
Yes, and almost every chapter you see at the bottom of the page, PE, which means personal experience. And so each of the members of the group had to keep a notebook. They wrote down the lessons and their experiments. Then they came back and reported, even as we do in groups now, on our weekly experiment. And so some of those were chosen to go in each chapter of Search for God, book 1 and book 2 and book 3.
So this group is studying these lessons, and as they study the lessons, they're writing a chapter about each lesson, but they're not allowed to move on to the next one until the source tells them that they have mastered that lesson.
Right.
So this was not a quick process, was this?
No, this took 11 years for 2 books, not counting the 3rd book, which was done in little bits and pieces. But the first book took 3 years, and the 2nd book took 8. And the 2nd book is deeper. Each of the chapters builds on the preceding chapter, and so it gets deeper and deeper and deeper into the work of explaining psychic ability and what is necessary and important for evolving in that.
And so the first group started, it was, I believe, Norfolk #1, Norfolk, Virginia, was the first group, which is where I live now in Norfolk, Virginia. And then from there, other people got the idea and I believe the second group to start, if I'm not mistaken, was actually in New York City. Do you know that? I've heard that.
No, I think it's a little bit later. There were 2 groups in Norfolk. Then there was a Washington, D.C. group. Then I think there was a New York group. It kind of crept up the eastern seaboard.
And so we've made some references. You've made some references to experiments and reporting on the experiment. Maybe we should explain what happens in a Search for God group. What is the group exactly? What does it do?
Let Vanna tell you, because she's careful in all of our group meetings. She writes down the discipline or the experiment every week, and then she pulls out her little paper and gives a report, just like the first members of the first group. So Vanna, you tell them.
You know, it's a lot different than any other book club that you might think of, because we really are applying what we're reading. So we have a moment of silence in the beginning. We're connecting with one another. We have a little business portion. Then we go into our discipline sharing, which is we pull something out of the material that we read in the following week, the previous week, and we pull it out and we say, how can we apply this in our daily life in the coming week? And from there, we go into deeper discussions on the next reading and whatever the lesson might be, you know, cooperation, know thyself, fellowship, patience, and we continue on throughout the reading. Some groups, it takes, you know, sometimes we'll read a paragraph in the time of our meeting, because it can be so dense and deep and thought-provoking within a group of like-minded friends. And then we'll create another discipline based on whatever we just read and the material that sticks out to us. We also meditate together. We keep a prayer list for all of our group members, their family, friends, anyone that we have concern for. We have meditation and prayer at the end. So it's really a group of like-minded people connecting on principles that we already know, we already have within us and we've experienced. But until you really break it down with friends, you could study this on your own. But I think it can be really challenging until you bring it to a friend and you guys really talk about it and break it down.
Well, let's give you an example, Lynn. Our study group that Vanna and I are in together here, a staff group on Friday, we decided, because so many people noticed that they were having challenges when they were driving behind the wheel. So we set a discipline that as we were in our cars and people were doing ungodly things on the road, that we would say to them, "Bless you, change me." So
Yeah.
it helped us be a little better at our own driving and certainly with our own attitude. That's just a very easy example of something. We could do something that's a lot more different, like take a person that you're having a really hard time with and try to forgive that person if they've hurt your feelings or hurt you in some way or betrayed you or whatever. And then that's another level of a discipline. I was in a group once and we were working on a physical discipline. And so the person suggested that we all drink 8 glasses of water a day and gave us a chart, a water chart, so that we could check off every glass we drank, which, it worked. You drank them because you were doing your homework.
Which is one of the Edgar Cayce recommendations, is that you should have 8 glasses of water every day.
That's right.
So that just
depends on what you're reading. It's different every time, and a group could read the exact same paragraph and come up with a completely different discipline. So that's what's beautiful too.
So just to go over that. So each meeting you read from the book. You choose something from what you've read that you're going to practice during the week. So it's not just learning about it, it's actually applying it, living it.
Then we come back next week and everybody gets a chance to share. We even have a little timer. You have 2 minutes to tell what you did, sticking to the principle, and then we go around the room and it's so interesting to hear how everybody did it, and if you're not comfortable or you didn't do it, you just say, "I pass." There's no shame in that, but we try to do the work every week.
There's almost never the same 2 reports, but you can see the same thread that runs through every single person's experience.
So you've used the word discipline, but you've also used the word experiment. And I've been thinking about that because the name of the organization is the Association for Research and Enlightenment. And I know the ARE has sponsored various different kinds of research at different times, but you could look at the Search for God groups. I sometimes look at them as like a sort of a laboratory where you are actually doing personal research by trying these experiments in the principles that the readings suggest or that the book suggests. So it is kind of like a little personal laboratory. You do these experiments.
It is.
So the weekly meeting includes reporting on the previous experiment, reading the book, choosing a new experiment, meditating together, praying together, and groups are also encouraged. Some groups that I've been did this, and some have trouble with it. They're encouraged to find a time to meditate all together. I mean, they're not going to be together, they're going to be in their own homes, but they're encouraged to find a specific time of day when they'll all meditate simultaneously. That's kind of challenging, but I know it's one of the recommendations.
Well, you know, when Mr. Casey worked with the first group, they couldn't decide what time they would all agree to meditate. So he decided for them. He said 2 a.m. And then they wished they had decided together.
And he woke them up.
He woke them up psychically, and then he taught some of the people in the group how to do that. So Hugh Lynn told me that Hannah Miller used to wake him up regularly. He'd be sound asleep. He was in college, he was the youngest guy in the group. He'd be sound asleep and he'd wake up, he'd look at the clock, 2 a.m. And finally he confronted Hannah and said, "Are you doing that?" And she said, "Yes."
It's really a very good time to meditate, actually, if you can, I mean, some people have done that intentionally because there's a lot less interference, thought waves interfering when you're up at 2 a.m.
Well, we know that the man who wrote the Jesus Aquarian Gospel book, he did all of that between 2 and 4 in the morning, and other authors have done the same.
So we talked about how the Search for God group spread sort of up the eastern seaboard, but they've actually gone a lot further than that, right? They're international now, are they not?
We have them nearly in every state and Canadian provinces and around the world. We might have I'd say about 50 areas in countries around the world where we have ARE members who are explaining the work to other people who are interested, helping to start an ARE study group. We do have some centers, actually, brick and mortar buildings like yours used to be in New York. We have one in Japan, one in China. Most of them, Albania. Yeah, we have our friend Marissa Tusha in Albania. She's translating the Search for God into Albanian right now. But
That's wonderful.
Yeah, and this is what the original readings that he gave over that 11-year period. There's a total of 130 readings, Lynn, and that's book 1, book 2, and book 3. And sometimes when people finish with the read books, they decide to read the whole reading. And you get an education and quite a feeling for the people in the group. And then when they finish that, if they want, they could go to book 3, of course, or they could go to the expanded Search for God, which are other books. And these are readings that were taken from people's life readings and health readings. And they're not in the Red Book. There's brand new material that was pulled out because it talked about the Search for God chapters. So it's all been leached out and put together in books that people can then study if they're so inclined.
So this is material that was in readings for other people. It wasn't in the original Search for God series, but they mentioned the Search for God.
Right. So here's what happened, I think. Mr. Casey got on fire with this. Gladys said these readings saved his life, she thought. And he got so excited and involved in what he was doing that when he was giving a health reading, he'd start talking about the Search for God. It was like in him to do that.
Well, that's actually why I wanted to do this this interview, because I've done interviews with other people where all of a sudden they're talking about Search for God, and then we have to pause the interview and explain what a Search for God group is. And Judith, you and I did an interview on this for Hercules a couple of years ago, but it was Blog Talk Radio, and I don't think that link is active anymore. So I wanted to do it again and have that link to be able to share with people because it comes up all the time. So, many people seem to feel that the Search for God work is kind of like the heart of the KC readings, or that these readings that came out of this dark time in Casey's life are really the most important. Different people have different views about that, but I've heard some people say they think that this is the most important part of the Casey's material.
Interestingly enough, both Hugh Lynn Casey and Gladys Davis Turner both said they felt the Search for God body of work were the most important readings to come out of all of the readings. Now, of course, if you have a health condition and you've got a health reading that's going to help you get better, that's going to be the most important reading that you've ever encountered. But I can understand on another level how they've heard all of the readings, and this body of work resonates the most with them.
And that's one of the things about the Edgar Cayce material is that if you're interested in the spiritual development, there's this whole body of the Search for God work and many other things in the readings. If all you want is to cure your scleroderma problem, there's a reading about that. If all you want to know is about ancient Egypt, there's, lots of information about that. But, some of us think that some of that other information about healing and valuable as it is, was put there partly to bring people in to get to the spiritual part, although you can kind of pick and choose what you want to deal with.
Yeah.
And speaking of healing, Vanna will tell you.
We have a healing prayer group that is also incredibly beneficial. We have prayer services here for anyone who needs them. We have an emergency prayer list who you can call in right away, and we can provide immediate prayer from our Glad Helpers Healing Prayer Group. But not only that, this is a new fact that I've heard recently. Lynne actually told Charles Thomas that it was more important for the CEO to be a part of this prayer group than to do any of the CEO's work. This was told to me by one of the Glad Helpers members who knew Charles Thomas.
Wow.
So if that doesn't speak to how powerful this work is and how powerful the prayer work is and undergirds everything that we do here, really.
Okay, so two things. First, Charles Thomas was Edgar Cayce's grandson, Lynne's son. So we're like on the second generation after Edgar Cayce, and he was the CEO of the National ARE for quite some time.
Yes.
So that's why he was being told that it was that important for him to be part of that prayer group. Okay, now that you brought up the prayer group, in the future, I want to do an interview basically about that prayer group. But right now, the prayer group actually originated from the first Search for God group. So maybe we could tell that story.
Sure.
Edgar Cayce had a dream.
He had a dream about a month after the first group started. And in the dream, it was told to him that he needed to start a prayer group to support the study group. And it named 7 people in the group already to be in the prayer group. And it said that those 7 people had been with him in Egypt, and they had all worked together at the Temple Beautiful as healers. So they had healing experience. They came back in a group, put them to work. That's what he said.
So he was told in a dream, start this healing prayer group and start it with these 7 people who are already in the Search for God group. So
Right.
And that started in the 1930s or 1940s?
Started right after the Search for God group started. That started in September 1931, and the Glad Helpers started a couple of months later, October, I think.
Right. And the series of readings is all about healing prayer, meditation, symbols in the Revelation, and the Indrakan system, which is a very dense, heavy group of readings. But the prayer group that we have now, meeting Tuesdays and Wednesdays, in person and online, they study this series of readings.
Okay, so the Glad Helpers prayer group that was started with Edgar Cayce, and he was a member, along with these other 7 first people, that group is still going now.
It's been meeting almost 100 years, Lynn. It will be 100 years in 2031.
Obviously, there are different people in it now, but
That cycle through.
and now it's also there's one meeting each week in person and another meeting online. So you are all adjusting to the changing times there.
We are. And now that you say that, our Search for God groups are online and in person as well. So we have, I host about 10 groups a week that are Search for God mostly, but then there's a dream group. There is a psychic development group using the circulating files on psychic development. There is a comparative study group of
Bible study.
Search for God, Course in Miracles, and the Bible. And then there's a Bible study group that is going great guns. We are making our way through the Old Testament and using Bob Krasinski's book on Edgar Casey's story of the Bible. I'm telling you, and everybody in it is doing research projects, bringing in more information, helping us understand as we go along.
So the Search for God group was the first group, and then that kind of set off this whole other program of all these various different kinds of groups and set the ball rolling, right?
Well, what happened is the Search for God group is the stable. It is the focus of everything. And people who've been in Search for God after a while occasionally like to take a break, work on dreams, study the revelation, whatever. Then they come back to the material. So there's kind of a cycling through. And what we've tried to do is to use the same study group format and apply the other text material in place of the Search for God for people who want to do that. For
I think
me,
it opens the opportunity for us to meet people where they're at too. You know, some people find the Search for God material or even just the title alone really intimidating because, you know, it's not just about God, it's for everyone. But that title really catches people.
right.
So to have something like dreams or psychic development or the Bible is a little more gentle sometimes for others.
Something for everyone, kind of.
That's it.
Getting back to the Search for God, it's hard to stay focused because it kind of does, from that point, it does kind of go off in all directions. But getting back to the Search for God, do you have any concept of how many Search for God groups are going in the world today?
Well, Vanna has an idea. She'll tell you that. We know that they're not all affiliated with us. We find new ones all the time, and of course, we're starting new ones too.
Yeah, so just to tell you, around 5 years ago when I started, we are coming out of the pandemic with about 130 or so groups. We're now at around national and international, around 700 groups and growing. So, you know, we're steadily moving on as the world is expanding and what they need. Our groups really are doing the same thing.
And Lynn, we've got over 100 groups in prison. Our prison program. We're working with people meeting in prison rooms or chapels where they can, meeting in the yard, meeting in someone's cell. You know, we have every manner of group happening in prison, which is a great goodness.
It is a great goodness. So, as you said, not all of the groups that get started necessarily tell you about themselves. So those, what did you say, 700? There might be, quite a lot more that you don't even know about.
Well, when I left a few years ago before coming right back, there were 1,600 around the world. That was the figure that I left on, 1,632, if I remember correctly. And that was counting the international groups and the other groups. But we never really know how many there are. And it really isn't about numbers, is it? It's about getting the word out and letting people come to something that can enrich their life and make things better. That's what being in a group, I think, does.
Now, when you and I and Suzanne O'Neill, when we did the interview about the prison program,
Yeah.
There were a lot of people in prisons who had sent in cards and letters and sometimes drawings and so forth. Of course, the prison program, there's a whole there is a correspondence program, which is a little different thing than the Search for God groups. But do you get people writing to you about their Search for God experience and
Well, I'm so glad you asked, because guess what? In the last issue of the magazine that we sent out to the members, 2 of our study group members actually wrote in to the members' stories. And I want to just read a little excerpt, if I can, of each. So this is a Rosetta Mobley, from Sedona, Arizona. She said, I jumped fully into the profound A Search for God books like a fish jumping into a clear, fresh lake. They answered my questions that had not been answered before, especially explaining the spiritual purpose of suffering. I loved hearing that applying personal ideals is essential to soul growth, and that God is always with us, easily accessible through our spiritual centers and meditation. And then Daniel wrote in from California. He's in two of the groups that I'm in online. And he said, through participation in a CAYCE'S study group, I've been able to move spiritual truths from the realm of intellectual understanding into lived experience and practical application. In the same way, working daily with the Glad Helpers prayer list and the 281 affirmations, those are the series of prayer group readings that Vanna showed you in this book. Working with those, he said, gives me an opportunity to pour out the love and creative energy raised during meditation. The readings taught me never to give up or walk away from difficult situations, reminding me that no opportunity is lost. I'm encouraged to forgive readily and to continue forward in a spirit of love, faith, and cooperation. Isn't that beautiful?
That is beautiful.
Yeah. So all you have to do is ask a study group member what about this work has helped them. And you know,
They won't hold back.
They don't hold back. They tell it like it is.
Well, both of you have now Search for God experience. How many years have you been in Search for God groups, Judith?
I started in 1968. I was lucky enough to bump into Gladys Davis Turner. I think I told you before, she was picking up trash in the parking lot. I was picking up trash in the parking lot. We were on different sides and we kind of met in the middle. And it was my first week at ARE, brand new. And she said to me, "You're new, aren't you, honey?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am, I am." And she said, "Are you in a study group?" I didn't even know what they were. And I said, "No, ma'am, I'm not." And she said, "I want you to come on Monday night." And she pointed across the street to the old two-story house where the nurses' quarters were and where people lived from the ARE. She said, "That's where we meet, 7 o'clock." So I turned up 7 o'clock on a Monday night, and I was there for 17 years, every Monday night, unless I was traveling for the ARE.
And Vanna, how long have you been in a group?
I'm going on 5 years now. And Judith, you know, imagine my luck running into Judith as the first person that I met at the ARE. And I can't tell you how many other people probably have that same exact story, that they found her in the meditation room. She's like a genie. She just pops up, you know, right when you need her in exactly the right time. And so fortunate to have that experience.
That's interesting. So Gladys Davis, who again, she eventually became Gladys Davis Turner, who again was Edgar Casey's secretary and stenographer. She sort of almost like she passes the torch to Judith, and Judith is in the process of sort of handing it. Well, now you're kind of holding it together, I think. But
yes,
yeah. So tell me about your Search for God experience. What has it meant to you?
Well, for me, as a single mom, when I went into Gladys's group, I believe it helped me be a better parent. I think it helped me understand patience in a different way. That chapter 7 in book 1, Patience, about did me in. But because I was trying to do the weekly disciplines and I was working with Sean, my son, at home, it really, really helped. It really made a difference. That was a big thing. And the second biggest thing I noticed for myself was I couldn't blame anybody else. The readings taught me to take total responsibility for where I am and what's going on, and to ask the question, what does this have to teach me? What does this person have to teach me? What does this situation have to teach me? What is the lesson? Not why am I bothered by this person? Why am I taking something personally? Why am I getting my feelings hurt or whatever? Vanna, what about you?
Yeah. Well, I felt like I studied a lot in solitude, and, you know, I was feeling like I had existential crises, you know, at a very young age. And I was studying a lot of different material, a lot of gurus, and I felt like when I found the readings, it felt like I was coming home and finding material that finally resonated with me. But it wasn't always easy to handle or break down on my own and really dissect. And so joining a group once I moved to Virginia Beach and came to the ARE, it felt like I found my soul tribe, my family, like right here. And it completely changed my life. And like Judith said, it's really about the accountability. You know, I had all this material swirling around my head, but what was I really doing with it if I wasn't consciously coming back to it every single week and saying, how am I using this? How am I applying this? How am I changing myself to make a better community, a better state, a better world around me?
What's so interesting about the study group is that you find that the things that people have been telling you your whole life, you know, the things that are irritating them, the things that are bothering them about you, those are the things that you need to work on and change. It isn't the other person. You always want to think, no, it's them. You know, they've got to change. But really, it points it back to yourself. And you have to take that responsibility and begin to make those adjustments.
Yeah, the readings say a lot of times when people are having some sort of difficulty in life, the readings say you are meeting self.
Yeah.
And that might have to do with something that you did in a previous lifetime that you're now
Yeah.
Bumping into, you know, and experiencing from the other side or whatever. Or it might have to do with your behavior in this lifetime or whatever. But that whole, you know, meeting self, it doesn't allow you to get into victimhood, you know.
No, doesn't allow it at all. And then you have instances of people, you know, like the two brothers who came back and got readings from Edgar Cayce. One was blind, one was not. And the life readings that they got explained the blindness and said that in a previous lifetime, they had been in a war setting and they were captured and they were forced to put out the eyes of other people. One brother enjoyed doing it, the other did not. So the brother who enjoyed inflicting pain on someone else came back blind in this lifetime. And and there was another reading that struck me, and you see these all the time. You know, you're looking through the circulating files. By the way, anybody listening, if you want to study the readings, you get a circulating file. There are hundreds of them on every kind of conceivable illness or disease or condition, and non-medical files on everything. But
we should actually probably explain circulating files.
all right.
They are hard copy files that you could borrow and keep for a while and make copies of and then return them. But they're also now online, most of them.
Yes, they are. They're being loaded online right now, one by the other. And here is what they look like from my little corner. This is individuality and personality, destiny, the way, what is that? Thought forms,
Body and soul.
body and soul. So these happen to be non-medical files, but here's the list, which you can get on.
That was upside down.
Upside down.
Okay.
Here's the list, and it has hundreds of files. And I'm telling you, everything from soup to nuts. And the first time that I used a file, I got the file on warts because I had a wart on my hand my whole childhood. I used to chew it off. It always came back. Isn't that horrible? But I did. And it always came back. And when I came here, I saw there was a circulating file on warts and moles. So I got it. And it said, make a paste of baking soda and castor oil and put it on there and put a Band-Aid on it. So I did that and then showered it off, put on a fresh Band-Aid. 2 weeks later, it was gone. It never came back. That made a believer out of me. From then on, I went to castor oil packs. I went right down I tried the eye packs, you know, for tired eyes. I tried everything, pretty much everything, and I'm still trying it. So, you know, the proof is in the pudding. You know, if you try the part about meditation and it works and you're more peaceful and you feel better in your life, and you try drinking 8 glasses of water a day, and you find that you have no problem with eliminations, and you try a little of this and a little of that, and it all works, it lets you know that there's something worthwhile here.
That's for sure. So, with the Search for God program now, we've talked a little bit about how the program has adapted. This, and we also talked about this is a little bit sort of interesting. At one point, there were like 1,600 groups, and then they kind of sort of faded out a little bit, and now we're back up to 700 groups. Can you talk about that? Why do you think that happened, and what's happening now in terms of Search for God group development?
I'd like to hear what Savanna thinks, but my theory is that as people stop joining things, not just ARE study groups, all of the service clubs are down. You know, the Kiwanis, the Lions, all of them are dwindling. Church membership is dwindling in some areas. In other areas, it's expanding. But it's an interesting thing that everything kind of goes in waves, I think. And because I was one of those long-haired people, believe it or not, I'm short now, but when I got here, I could sit on my hair. And I was one who showed up in the 60s, and we all came in to help, I think, to serve. And I have the feeling now that there's another wave of us coming to help with the work, this work and the work of moving the world a little closer into the light. That's really what our work is about, isn't it? And we do that by changing ourselves.
Right. And I think it was the reset of COVID. You know, people weren't able to meet, you
Right.
know, around the country, around the world.
Yeah.
And many people, almost nobody used the platform of Zoom. Right now, we have a statewide study group that meets on Zoom in almost every state around the country. We're coming for you, West Virginia, next. But that's been the beauty of this strange process of people falling out of in-person groups to come back together in areas all around the country. I'm looking at a map that we have group members. Maybe we have 130 members around the entire state, but they are completely far flung. There's not a single person, you know, within 30 miles of each other. They're able to now meet all together online and maybe have a conference once a year where they meet up in person. So that has been the beauty of this rebuilding and kind of shifting in energy around the country and the world.
Yeah, in New York, I remember a time when we could throw a big meeting and, you know, invite people to come and learn about Search for God groups, and maybe like 40 people would show up, and they'd all be excited, and we'd, you know, divide them up into like, you know, maybe 8 groups or something like that, and just get a whole bunch of groups started that way. But then something happened. People got so busy, everybody got so busy, and also people got a little more guarded and a little less willing to have a bunch of people come to their home that they didn't already know really well. And at least that's how it seemed to me in New York. And so the number of groups started to decrease, and now it's possible to participate in all kinds of things. You know, it was possible before the pandemic, but we really learned that it was possible during the pandemic to do all kinds of things without, you know, through Zoom, which is maybe there'll be something else that'll follow Zoom that will be even better. But right now, Zoom seems to be the modality.
Yeah.
So I know that's been one of the major changes, is moving into remote groups.
And almost half of our groups now are meeting online, which is, you know, something we probably never thought that we would see.
No.
That almost half of that, you know, 700, those are all online groups.
And you know, Lynn, I had reservations about going online. I thought, how could we meditate online? We're all in different places. how can that work? But it does work. And what happens is, Uspensky says, and this is a Russian mathematician who was mentioned in the CAYCE'S readings as having been a sage, a seer who lived in a mountain cave or something. But he actually said that every group has a magnetic center, that something happens that coalesces in a group. And I've watched that over the 50 more years that I've been in groups. I've seen it happen in every group. I've had a group in my home all these years and watched what happens. There's an energy that comes together. You're praying for each other every day, meditating each day. You're working on a shared discipline or experiment each week. You're working with spiritual law, trying to move forward, each of us in our own way. And something happens. It's very hard to put in words, but you can feel it. And I think when people come here, they actually feel the energy. I believe this place is part of a vortex. And I'll tell you why. Because one night when I was working here late and I left and it was dark, I got in my car and I saw down the hill all these little lights. And I thought, those are not fireflies. They're flashlights. I thought, who's down there? So I waited in my car, and sure enough, one of the little lights detached itself, came up the hill to where I was. I rolled down my window, and a young man said to me, "Where are the vortexes?" He didn't say hello or can I help you or anything. He said, "Where are the vortexes?" And I said, "Can't you feel them?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "Well, they're right here." And it turned out he was part of a rock band that was playing down on the strip, and they had finished their set, and they all wanted to come to the ARE. So 9 of them came at midnight. And then I took them over to the labyrinth and had them walk the labyrinth. So it turned out to be a good evening for all, I think. But that's the kind of thing that happens here at the ARE. You just never know.
Never know what you're gonna find.
When you open the door, when you pick up the phone, it's just a wonderful experience.
That's funny that they show up at midnight, though.
They show up at all hours.
Well, tonight your friends showed up. They didn't know. They came here, the couple that you knew from New York, the mother and daughter arrived at the ARE when it had just closed. They saw me at my desk from the window, rang the doorbell, came in, and the first thing she said to me was, "I was in ARE of New York." And I said, "Oh, I'm familiar with that." And she said, "I don't guess you know my friend, Lynne MIceli, do you?" And I said, "Why, what a coincidence. I'm on an interview with her tonight." She couldn't believe it. That happens here all the time.
Maybe this doesn't exactly relate to the study group focus of our interview, but I don't know how many times I have been told this story, but with different variations. We ask somebody, "How did you learn about Edgar Cayce?" And they'll say, "I was in a bookstore and I was walking around looking at the different shelves, different books, and all of a sudden this book fell off the shelf at my feet. And I picked it up, and it was a book about Edgar Cayce." Now, variations on that same story. One person told me that same story, but the book fell off twice. She picked it up, put it back on the shelf, walked around again, came around again, and it fell off at her feet twice. It took twice for her to actually pick it up and look at the book. So another
I began to think there were Mexican jumping beans inside the books, and that certain people had the vibration, and when they approached it, the book leaped off the shelf into their arms. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that too, Lynne,
Yeah.
from many people.
Or another, well, it's not about the book, but I'm just going to share this story anyway. The story they told me, they were driving on a vacation. It started to rain passionately, like rain so heavily that they could not see. So they pulled off into a parking lot, and the rain continued. And finally, they just gave up and went into the building, and it was the ARE. It was the ARE headquarters. So
Yes, and we have people that walk in the building and say, "What is this place?" I just felt like I had to come in, but
Right.
what is it? What do you do here? So we take them to the third floor meditation room and have them have that experience.
I think people are naturally skeptical about the ARE. There's this one great, very short story about this man who we were praying for in the online group, and we had someone sitting in for him. He agreed to it, but he thought this is hocus pocus, laying on of hands. So etheric healing online, okay, go figure. And he's in the hospital. All of a sudden, his numbers start to change. We do our laying on of hands every time at a certain time. We're the online group. And he said, everybody said, I don't know what's happening. All of his numbers, they're elevating, they're balancing out. Everything's, fine. And they said, this is a miracle. And he said, it's no miracle. It's that weird prayer group praying for me right now. So it's natural that people are skeptical, but they have to, Mr. Casey said, come and see. If it works, take it. If it doesn't, leave it.
Well, all of the biographers of Casey, Thomas Sugar was a skeptic. He was he met Hugh Lynne in college. They were roommates or something like that.
Yes, they were.
And I think they didn't get along very well either at
Not
first.
at first. Oh, they argued mightily. And then
Past lives.
he went home to meet the family. And when he fell ill, he got readings from Mr. Casey. He got a life reading first, but when he got a physical reading, he was convinced because there's no way anyone would have known what Mr. Casey told him about himself that he knew. And so that's what did it for him. He actually lived with the family for 3 years.
He was applying the readings for his health condition. And then Harmon Rowe was a skeptic, and
Yes.
he came to ARE and ended up writing a biography.
Yes, he did.
Yeah, he was worried because his mother got involved with the ARE, and he thought she got involved with this weird cult, and he was going to go expose them. And he ended up writing the biography and working with Casey for a year, I think, out of his life. And then Sidney Kirkpatrick was a skeptic as well, right? And he wrote the most recent biography, Edgar Casey, An American Prophet, which is an extremely detailed but very well-written biography and extremely well-researched biography. So trying to get back to the Search for God groups before we have to close, how would you say, well, is there, besides Zoom, is there anything else in the offing about the Search for God program, about the future of the program?
Well, there is. We're about to, we will be, I'm not sure when, we'll be launching a mystery schools program at the ARE. We're working on curriculum right now. This is for people that are interested in the Essenes, the School of the Prophets. ARE is a mystery school. It always has been, but we've never called it that. We're going to try to put something together that will, we hope, speak to a whole new generation of Vannas and bring them right into our door. And we want to tell people that if you're interested and you're hearing this and you'd like to have a copy of this Edgar Casey's meditation book, if you contact Vanna or me, we will send it to you. We will send it to you snail mail, because that's how we don't have it online. We will send it to you if you want it. And you can reach Vanna at...
You can reach me at 757-457-7191. Again, 757-457-7191.
And email?
My email is Savanna, S as in Sam, ABANNA .Barbarian, BARBARIAN @edgarcasey.org.
And you can reach me at 757-457-7237. And I'm Judith, JUDITH .Stevens, STEV like Virginia, ENS @edgarcasey.org.
Wonderful. And we should probably spell Edgar Casey for people. It's EDGARCAYCE. Sometimes people expect Casey is going to be like Casey at the bat.
Right. Thank you for that.
Yes, and if anybody wants to reach me, I can be reached through ARE of New York at info, INFO, at EDGARCAYCENYC.org. That's EDGARCAYCENYC.org. Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Your enthusiasm, I think you, the two of you really kind of personify enthusiasm, and it's just really uplifting and fun to talk to the two of you.
We'll
So
do it
thank
again. We'll do it again.
we will do it again. Yes. So thank you so
Bring
much.
along that good-looking man with the interesting name, would you?
Do you mean Hercules?
I definitely mean Hercules.
Well, he'll definitely be along. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So thank you so much for doing this, and thank you, Hercules, for the opportunity to share this.
Thank you.
As always, it was an awesome presentation. A lot it left me to think about and to contemplate. So I thank you for that, and I look forward to upcoming conversations with both of you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Judith and Savanna.
Hey, good night, everybody.
Good
Good
night.
night.
Night.